The Enabler's Role in Mobbing and Scapegoating. Welcome back. I'm Adeline Atlas, 11 times published author, and this is the Family Roles series. Today's video is the 5th installment in the Enabler arc, and this one goes to the center of the wound. We're not talking about quiet complicity anymore. We're talking about covert aggression. We're talking about how the enabler who insists they're just keeping the peace actually becomes a primary force behind mobbing and scapegoating. Not in obvious direct ways, but in silent, layered, and psychologically destabilizing ones. This isn't neutrality. This is strategy, and it's what turns the scapegoat's experience from individual alienation into collective betrayal. In every narcissistic system, the family operates on an unspoken agreement. The narcissist is allowed to dominate, and everyone else agrees to play a role that keeps the illusion intact. The scapegoat is the one who refuses. They see what others won't. They speak when others stay silent. And for that, they become a threat. But it's not the narcissist alone who pushes them out. It's the group. It's the quiet sister who stops returning calls. It's the aunt who tells them to drop it already. It's the sibling who says, "You're making this harder than it needs to be." And it's the enabler, always smiling, always calm, who tells the narcissist everything you said. Let's start with the dynamic of mobbing. Mobbing is a collective emotional attack on an individual who disrupts group stability. It's not necessarily planned. It often unfolds in whispers, avoidant glances, group messages without your name, and cold smiles at gatherings. But underneath those small acts is a coordinated refusal to see you, hear you, or believe you. It's a social freezing out that comes not just from the narcissist, but from everyone who benefits by staying loyal to them. And no one facilitates that loyalty more than the enabler. The enabler fuels mobbing through positioning. They act as the reasonable one, the calm parent, the neutral sibling, the one who just wants peace. They claim they aren't picking sides, but they have all the access. They hear your confessions. They witness your pain. They receive your texts after a blow-up. And they collect all that emotional data only to deliver it, piece by piece, to the narcissist. Not necessarily in direct quotes, but through tone, framing, and selective emphasis. They say things like, "She's still really upset," or "He's not letting it go," or "They think you're trying to control them." This creates a feedback loop where your vulnerability becomes ammunition. This kind of emotional spying is rarely acknowledged. The enabler won't admit they've betrayed your confidence. In fact, they often convince themselves they're helping. They have a right to know how you feel, they'll say. But they're not delivering your truth for the sake of reconciliation. They're delivering it to keep their status, to stay in the narcissist's good graces, and to maintain their role as the bridge between the abuser and the rest of the family. Their allegiance is not with you, it's with power. One of the most covert ways the enabler contributes to scapegoating is through silence at critical moments. Imagine this. You finally get the courage to speak up at a family gathering. You say calmly and clearly, "That comment was inappropriate and hurtful." The narcissist snaps back, "Oh, here we go again." And the enabler says nothing. They don't step in. They don't clarify. They don't support. They sip their drink. They look away. And their silence does something devastating. It signals to the group that you are alone. That silence is not passive. It's a communication. It tells everyone, "We're not doing this." It creates emotional distance between you and the group. And the group, often unconsciously, picks up the cue. They change the subject. They don't ask follow-up questions. They don't circle back. They move on without you. And in that moment, you realize something deeper than disagreement has occurred. You've been marked. Not with words, but with silence. This kind of indirect attack doesn't leave bruises, but it leaves permanent psychological impressions. It tells you that being honest means being abandoned, that telling the truth means being shunned, that your pain makes others uncomfortable, and their discomfort matters more than your healing. The enabler didn't need to scream or confront you to create that message. All they needed to do was stay neutral when neutrality was betrayal. Another pattern of enabler behavior in mobbing dynamics is subtle dismissal. This isn't outright denial. It's more refined. When you speak up, the enabler doesn't argue. They dilute. They say things like, "That's just how your dad is," or "You're reading too much into it," or "Let's not rehash the past." These statements seem like boundary setting, but they are actually truth reframing. They take something raw, real, and harmful and package it as miscommunication. And they do it with emotional tone, with exasperation, with quiet eye rolls, with the long pause before they answer, with the expression that says, "I'm tired of this conversation." These nonverbal cues are invisible to outsiders, but obvious to the scapegoat. You know exactly what's happening. You're being pushed back into silence. Not through rejection, but through dismissal. Through the feeling that your voice is a burden to the person who claims to love you. Emotional triangulation is another weapon the enabler uses, especially when the scapegoat starts to pull away. If you go low contact or no contact with the narcissist, the enabler often steps in as the intermediary. They ask, "Can't you just talk to them?" They tell you, "They miss you." They relay messages like, "She's been really upset since you stopped coming around." But they don't hold the narcissist accountable. They don't demand change. They don't acknowledge your boundaries. They simply position themselves as the emotional courier without taking responsibility for the messages they carry. This keeps you tethered to the system even after you've tried to leave it. The enabler becomes the emotional middleman, always delivering guilt, never validation. They are not neutral. They are doing public relations work for the narcissist. They rebrand abuse as conflict. They rebrand manipulation as miscommunication. They rebrand boundary setting as estrangement. And by triangulating, they keep the scapegoat emotionally hooked, always trying to explain, to clarify, to justify why they need space. One of the most devastating betrayals the scapegoat faces is the enabler's performance of safety. For years, the scapegoat may have believed that the enabler was their ally, that the quiet parent, the compassionate sibling, the calm aunt was different. That maybe, just maybe, someone in the system saw the truth. But when the moment of rupture comes, when the scapegoat finally speaks, leaves, or sets a boundary, that enabler disappears. Or worse, they reappear only to talk you out of your decision. This is not passive betrayal. This is weaponized neutrality. The enabler will insist they see both sides. They'll say they don't want to get involved. But they are involved. They've been involved from the start. They were the ones framing the narrative. The ones deciding what got acknowledged and what didn't. The ones redirecting conversations when it got uncomfortable. The ones reporting back. And when the scapegoat realizes this, that the person they trusted was managing them the whole time, it creates a rupture deeper than the one caused by the narcissist. Because the narcissist was predictable, but the enabler was a false safe space. And when that space collapses, the psychological damage is layered. You're not just grieving the loss of connection. You're grieving the loss of the illusion that you were ever protected, that anyone ever really saw you. And that grief doesn't just burn, it isolates. This is why so many scapegoats report feeling more enraged at the enabler than at the narcissist. It's not because the enabler screamed louder. It's because the enabler whispered, nodded, reassured, and still protected the abuser. It's because the enabler was the one who could have changed something, could have intervened, could have believed, but chose to blend in instead. This rage is valid. It's not misplaced. Because the enabler's betrayal wasn't loud, but it was constant. It was the slow erosion of trust, camouflaged as maturity. It was the performance of compassion with none of the follow-through. And it's the reason why so many survivors end up not just leaving the narcissist, but leaving the entire family system. Not because they want to, but because they realize there is no room in that structure for truth, only for roles. When you leave the system, the enabler's behavior often escalates. They try to pull you back in not through force, but through manipulation. They say, "You're being cruel. You're tearing us apart. You're better than this." These are not compliments. These are compliance scripts. They are emotional contracts disguised as moral appeals. And they're designed to do one thing: get you to abandon yourself again. But you don't have to. You don't have to make them understand. You don't have to keep the illusion intact. You don't have to take one more guilt trip down the road of pretending. You can name what they did. You can see through the neutrality. You can stop performing for a system that was never built to hold your truth. Because the enabler's role in mobbing is not a side role. It's central. It's the quiet engine that powers the group dynamic. It's the emotional infrastructure that allows harm to be distributed, justified, and maintained. And it's what makes healing so hard, because you have to dig through layers of niceness, helpfulness, and reasonableness to see the control underneath. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's the beginning of freedom. Hi, I'm Adeline Atlas, 11 times published author, and what you just watched is part of my signature program, the Chosen One series inside School of Soul. This series is not just a course, it's a blueprint for those who know they were different from the start: the black sheep, the scapegoat, the truth teller, the cycle breaker. Inside, you'll discover the family roles playbook, the golden child, the scapegoat, the enabler, the lost child, and how to finally step out of the part you were cast in without consent. How the black sheep becomes the goat, turning rejection into radical transformation in leadership. How to break generational curses and rewrite ancestral contracts so the pain stops with you. And how to recognize and escape modern forms of spiritual and technological targeting, from gang stalking to synthetic synchronicity. This isn't just about survival. It's about awakening, about reclaiming your voice, your lineage, and your destiny as one of the chosen ones. Click the link below to access the full series now, because the role ends the moment you decide it does, and the real script begins with you.